Hey everyone, I am here doing a quick video on Saturn in the birth chart and the Saturn return, since I've been having a lot of people ask me questions about how to interpret this in their charts. Just want to give you guys a quick breakdown. So Saturn in the chart represents, in this case in particular, we're going to focus on its representation of definitions, crystallizations, the structure of our consciousness, and the conditioning. And so when we think about Capricorn, we also have to take into account its polarity of Cancer. And Cancer is going to be that reflection of Capricorn. So Cancer, in this case, represents the ego, which really is the identity formulated by our emotions, past lives, family, private time, and the roots of our consciousness. So as I mentioned in previous videos, we are here with dual desires, which is the desire to separate and the desire to return. And so that separating desire is actually just that point of creation. Like, for example, when you have a child, when you create a child, that is a separating desire, that's separating force, because you're creating another life form that is separate from you, but still an extension from you. And so that is a part of our motives here, is to experience separation and really to understand why we are here on earth, on this earth plane, is to create and to experience duality of separation and creation. And so therefore ego can be looked at as this point of separation, is an identity, something that we create that's separate from ourselves. Therefore, within my astrology readings, I try to keep the ego pretty neutral, and try to stay away from like ego's bad, because ego is actually a tool for us here. Ego is a reflection of our soul's journey. It's our creative power. And like I said, it's a representation of our identity. And so within Saturn in this correlation to Cancer within the chart, this polarity is that Cancer, Saturn is really defining, it's how we define our identity. And this definition comes through our conditioning, and through the structure of our consciousness. And so we will, looking at Saturn in the chart, ask ourselves, who am I? What's my purpose here? What am I here to achieve? And so that's when we get into the 7 year cycles of Saturn. So the 7 year cycles of Saturn, or Saturn's cycle in general. So Saturn in the chart is basically this journey of crystallization of the ego, or of the identity, right? And so we have these 4 markers which lead up to the Saturn return. And so we have the age of 7, age of 14, and age 21, and then 28 is a return. And so these cycles represent like really dynamic aspects that happen within your life because of Saturn's orbit, throughout the sky, right? So at the age of 7, you experience this crisis in action, which brings this awareness of limitations. And it's also that first point of formation of the ego. So around the age of 7, you might have an experience in your life that kind of like helps you, kind of kicks in that gear of maturity and helps you mature in some way or another. So just think about like what happened around that time. And it's that first point of where you're like, oh, wow, like I can't just do what I want to do. I'm not invincible. There is like this physical world here, and there's actually limitations and authority and things of that nature. And so the second point of Saturn's cycle is going to be at age 14, which creates this opposition. And so within this part of the cycle, this is when you start to see yourself in opposition of authority. And this is when, that teenager cycle really begins, and you kind of just want to do your thing and just like, fuck everybody. Like, I can do what I want. I'm grown, So it's that whole period. So you also find, you experience some form of limitation or some reflection. You'll experience some kind of reflection of, who you're becoming within your world, and just how your ego is in your identity is starting to structure itself. And so anything that challenges or limits you to really connecting to that identity is going to feel like kind of combative and at opposition. Okay, so then the next stage in this cycle is the age 21. Where at this point you're at this point of a crisis in consciousness or a crisis in belief. So then you start to question conditioning and belief systems regarding your ego, your purpose, work what you're here to do. This is the point around, for me, age 20, I really was like, I was an atheist, then I was agnostic, but then I really got into Wicca and stuff like that. And so that was kind of like me really breaking free from my conditioning of my childhood. So you might want to think about what was going on around age 21. Finally, we reached the Saturn return, which is at that age of 28. And this is when Saturn makes a complete cycle and returns to the exact spot where it was when you were born, to the degree. And so really this correlates to the orbit of Saturn around the sun. So this is essentially you coming home to yourself. This is basically that balsamic phase / conjunction new phase. And so this is you centering yourself, finalizing this crystallization process of your identity. So therefore, you're going to be dissolving parts of the ego that are limiting you from evolving and moving closer and closer to your purpose and that deeper sense of purpose, which is why things seem to break down around this time, because the universe is working with you in such a way where you can align more with what you are here to actually do and what you're here to achieve. So that is the Saturn return and Saturn in the chart in a nutshell. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to me.